Take a moment to look at this historic image. Please raise your hand if you recognize where this flag was originally raised. So, as many of you have already noticed, this is of course the Israeli ink flag, raised in Eilat, Rashrash in 1949, marking the end of the War of Independence. And I believe that many of us are familiar with images like this one. Think, for example, of the American flag at Iwo Jima, Japan, or the Soviet flag over the Reichstag in Berlin, both in 1945. These iconic moments represent an image of victory. And you don't have to be a trained historian to see that images like these are not innocent representations of the past. They are carefully constructed moments, built with great effort. Another example. The first American astronauts planting the flag on the moon in 1969. It was not just about reaching the moon. It was also an American declaration of victory in the Cold War space race. And whether it is a triumph in space or a battlefield achievement, consider the unimaginable efforts behind these images, sometimes taken with no oxygen or under fire. Now, let me ask you, why do people risk their lives for an image? What lasting impact does it have on the next astronaut or the next soldier? And maybe, what price do we all pay for this relentless pursuit of images? Recently, we might have seen how this price can look like. In the past few months, the phrase "a total victory" has echoed repeatedly in the context of the war in Gaza. Yet the gap between the image and reality has never been so sharp. But let's step away from the current discourse and dive into the past. It is March 21st, 1968, just a couple of months after the Six-Day War. Israel was dealing with a series of terror attacks carried out by Palestinians infiltrating from Jordan. In response, Israel invaded Karame, a small town in Jordan that had become the headquarters of the Palestinian organization Fatah. How did the Israeli press cover this clash between Israel, the Jordanian army, and Palestinian forces? Let's take a look at the following Israeli newsreel.
צה"ל יצא להלום בחבלנים בבסיסיהם שמעבר לגבול. הפשיטה על קראמה, סאפי וסיסי הייתה הגדולה והמקפת בפעולות צה"ל לבד משלוש המלחמות. הפשיטה הוכיחה לחבלנים כי הגבול לא ישמש להם מגן ומסתור. ידו הארוכה של צה"ל השיגה אותם גם משעקרו למקומות חדשים כבסביבת אירביד או סלט.
What is not mentioned in the newsreel is the fact that Israel suffered heavy losses during the operation in Karame. The price the victims Israel paid were left unspoken. The Jordanians, however, did speak about Israel's losses, loud and clear. Their press featured images of King Hussein inspecting destroyed Israeli tanks and abandoned ammunition. What about the Palestinians? For them, Karame was neither an Israeli nor a Jordanian triumph. The Fatah framed the Jordanian success on the battlefield as a Palestinian achievement, turning Karame into a national Palestinian myth. So, what exactly happened in Karame? Was it a Palestinian victory, a Jordanian triumph, an Israeli one? And does it even matter at all? Because what we see in front of us is a battle of perception. It is less about historical reality itself and more about how each side chooses to interrupt, to represent, to shape this history. The case of Karame is a powerful example of this battle of perception, and it is also the starting point of my research. In 1968, Israel was in the midst of the war of attrition, Milchemet HaAttasha, facing an escalation in Palestinian terror attacks. During active war and ongoing fighting, both Israelis and Palestinians developed a new weapon, the camera. Like the astronauts planting the flag on the moon or the soldier on the battlefield, both sides discovered the impact of moving images. The images of Karame proved to the Palestinians the power of audiovisual media, so much so that they established a dedicated Palestinian film unit just a short time after the operation, and it was affiliated to Fatah. And in Israel, just 2 months after the operation, on May 2nd, 1968, the Israeli television began its official broadcast with the coverage of a military parade that took place in Jerusalem. One of the driving reasons behind the establishment of the Israeli television was to counter Arab audiovisual propaganda and to broadcast to Palestinians living in the newly occupied territories. The verb to shoot carries a duality. It refers both to firing a bullet, but also to the process of recording with a camera. And since 1968, the battlefield of this conflict has extended beyond bullets into the field of film and media. Visual representation has become a prominent and active participant in this battle of perception. If we wish to comprehend the gap between what actually happened and what was perceived or believed to have happened, we must adopt a complex perspective, one that examines how historical events are represented in the media, shaping perception that in turn influence the future historical events. And it is a repeating cycle that both sides remain trapped in till this day. To fully grasp this cycle, we should connect historical reality with its representation in the media, with how the history is reflected in the media. And my aim, my study, deals with Israeli and Palestinian propaganda films from 1967 to 1987, analyzing them alongside other historical documents. I aim to connect representations of history with history itself. And academic scholarship is saturated with studies on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, deeply analyzing military, policy, and diplomacy. Yet, all of these rich histories rarely consider films and media. On the other hand, film studies often focus narrowly on content analysis, neglecting the broader historical context of the films. What is missing is a deeper exploration of how films not only reflect or represent history, but also actively shape the reality that they emerge from. And my study aims to fill this gap. Using multidisciplinary approach, I combine both historical analysis with film studies methodologies and examine the films in their original historical context. I examine explanatory films, newsreel, TV broadcasts, documentaries, and even feature films, all of them produced or funded by national authority. I explore a range of archives and primary sources, including official protocols, personal letters, production files, and newspaper clippings. Analyzing them, I uncover the policies behind the films, trace their production, and understand their impact and perception. This combination of historical analysis with film studies methodologies has the power to shed new light on history and maybe even to challenge historical assumptions and beliefs. And we have already seen how Karame was celebrated in the Israeli press, framed as a huge image of victory. Yet, a search in the archives reveals what high-ranking Israeli officers thought at the time about the operation. Ariel Sharon, then the head of the IDF instruction department, stated that the operation was more of an achievement for Fatah than a victory for the IDF. It carries profound implication. It boosted Arab morale. In a classified closed meeting, Sharon exposed a crack in the Israeli attempt to portray Karame as an image of victory, as a story of success. He highlighted the tension between the media's representation of reality and reality itself, which was much more complicated. And Sharon was not alone. A deeper look into the daily press archives reveals other voices questioning the notion that Karame was an Israeli story of success. One of the voices was the Israeli lyricist Chaim Hefer, who published just a few days after the operation a short op-ed in Yediot Acharonot. Its closing lines were the following: פעולת צה"ל הצליחה, בזאת אין כל ספק, אז מדוע לב העם הזה חרד ודופק? אולי מפני שלפתע רואהו כמו בתמונה את המלחמה הזו נמשכת עוד 50 שנה. Was Chaim Hefer right? 56 years later, it seems undeniable that this nation's heart is still anxious and beat out. We might have had countless of images of victory, but they're accompanied by profound loss and shared grief. By combining audiovisual analysis and audiovisual materials with historical sources, we can gain a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of this history of the conflict. It might also help us to better understand our current reality. My hope is that 50 years from now, we will see a completely different image from this one. Thank you.